That's nice 1940 footage that actually shows the main Fliegerhorst, or airfield, in France, where Fighter Squadron 3 was based out of. Today you'll see part 3 of a series that covers the private diary of Colonel Massow, who was the designated Fighter Leader 3, which made him responsible for providing fighter support for the bomber formations that took part in Operation Paula, the attack on Paris, on June 3rd of 1940. 460 fighters and 640 bombers took part in the operation. In part 1 and 2, I introduced Massow's original diary and gave background information on the raid. Here we'll continue with his first-hand account up to his crash landing behind enemy lines. There will be a part 4 that will cover his escape. If you haven't seen parts 1 and 2, I certainly suggest that you go back and watch them. If you like the way that I put together multiple primary source materials to produce these videos, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can also see additional related footage at military1945.com, where there will eventually be a video on demand platform. Take a look. You'll like it. I promise. With the operations around Dunkirk coming to an end, the Germans turned their attention to delivering a knockout blow to the French. To do this, the Luftwaffe hoped to destroy the remaining elements of the French Air Force either in combat in the air or, preferably, on the ground. Operation Paula was intended to do this. The French had been warned of the impending attack by the British, but due to incompetence, only 80 fighters were scrambled to intercept the German formations, and they were flying at too low an altitude to be effective. I was flying behind Captain Maltzahn's squadron, and at an altitude of 7,000 meters, we approached Paris. Through heavy fog, I was able to watch as wave after wave of bombers and dive bombers precisely executed their runs. Just southwest of Paris, approximately over Versailles, when the fighters made a tactical zig-zag maneuver. Intently watching the execution of the operation, I was slow to join in the maneuver and fell slightly behind the formation. At just that moment, a battery of French flak guns turned their attention on Maltzahn's squadron. As is typical for French gunners, they aimed short, and their shots landed behind their targets, which unfortunately left the shells bursting precisely around my 109. There was a sudden strong jolt, and the entire plane began to vibrate, which told me that the engine had been hit. The cooling liquid streamed out, the crankshaft began making a terrible grinding sound, the oil pressure dropped considerably, and the cockpit began filling with smoke. I was instantly covered in dirty hot oil, but fortunately uninjured. The situation was critical, as I flew completely blind at an altitude of 6,000 to 7,000 meters above Paris. There's really not much time to contemplate in a burning plane. At the moment, I was thinking, just don't get captured. If I used my parachute, then I'd certainly be taken by the French, which was out of the question. Having taken part in a 1,000 plane attack on Paris, I couldn't expect that a captured pilot would be treated well. This French newsreel was released on June 6th. The footage was likely taken around the time of Operation Paula and could very well be showing pilots from the 10 German planes that were shot down during the attack on Paris. Dazed and coughing heavily from the smoke, I managed to pull open the canopy and immediately had a better view. Being out in the open and able to breathe took away the panic of being trapped inside a burning cockpit. With my compass damaged, orienting myself to fly back to the northeast was difficult. It was already clear that getting back to the airbase at Couvron, near Lyon, would not be possible, and I wanted at least to go in the right direction so as to get myself as close to the German lines as possible. Every kilometer I could now fly would be important. At least I was now out of the range of the flak fire. With my 109 in this condition, if engaged by enemy fighters or destroyers, I most certainly would have been an easy prey. Fighting back wouldn't have been possible. Fortunately, they all had their hands full with our Messerschmitts, that they were engaged with at medium altitude, including Captain Maltzahn's squadron, which was now no longer in sight. Busy fulfilling their mission, they certainly couldn't have noticed that I was no longer to the rear of the formation. And even if they had, there was nothing that they could have done. The fire streaming out of the engine was melting parts of the plane and producing an intense heat inside the cockpit. However, at least momentarily, I still had control and could maintain my position behind a bomber squadron that I'd spotted, which were now returning home. I'd continue following as long as I could. Attempting a crash landing was an option. The idea of landing a burning plane might seem straightforward, but in truth, there's a long list of prerequisites that are necessary to make the maneuver possible. First of all, the fire obviously can't spread to the point of destroying the plane or injuring the pilot seriously before the landing is completed. There's also the danger of the fire cooking off any munitions that the plane might be loaded with. That happening while in flight would be fatal. Complete concentration to the task at hand is necessary, and the smoke and heat can certainly distract the pilot or cause him to lose consciousness. If the emergency landing is somehow successful, the pilot needs to be able to get out and away quickly because the damaged plane can explode. During a crash landing in a small fighter, the pilot can easily get stuck inside a cockpit due to physical damage to the plane, or if the pilot has suffered broken bones, that might make movement impossible. But the Messerschmidt is wonderfully built to the highest German standards and can withstand much more damage than most other planes, which makes this option viable. That was it. The decision was made. I'd attempt a crash landing. And actually, the whole decision-making process was much faster than the writing of this description now. With the engine beginning to fail, I took a lingering last glance at the bombers ahead, and then turned my attention to finding a suitable landing area. There wasn't a moment to spare. Not far off, and in between two forested areas, I saw a field that seemed adequate. If the landing was successful, then the trees might also provide me with a place to hide from the enemy. The moments leading up to touchdown are filled with tension. Complete concentration is vital. Since I wasn't landing on a smooth runway, the lowering of the landing gear was out of the question. They likely would have caused the plane to flip over immediately, changing the crash landing into a straightforward crash. The details as to what happened when contact was made with the ground, and those fleeting moments afterwards, are difficult to put into words. I reacted automatically. There were a few hard jolts in all directions. Dirt, dust, and pieces of plane flew everywhere. There was an intense burst of heat, and then the forward motion of the plane slowed and then suddenly stopped. We'll continue with part 4 of the series, which follows Colonel Massow's escape back to German lines. It's really an incredible first-hand account from a well-known historical figure. If you like the videos I produce, please remember to subscribe to the channel. I've added additional Luftwaffe footage at military1945.com that I'm sure you'll like. Thanks for watching.